So I guess I want to get into because I this just occurred to me. Writing is such like a personal process and an artistic thing, but I feel like the hardest part of writing is actually emotional, like self-doubt and just all of these emotions that like come up when you're like creating like, poems, stories, novels. Um I guess could you like speak on that?
Yeah, sure. Do you mean like in terms of what the writing brings up or just like what what the
I
writing
guess
career
self-doubt
brings
is
up?
probably a safer one. I don't want to have to
Yeah.
get too personal.
Okay, that's
Like,
fine.
well, how do you get over like
I'm just
self
like, I'll
doubt, I
get
guess?
personal. Um,
Or do you not? I mean, I don't know. I feel like most of the time I have it and I just go anyway.
yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I think that every writer needs to have a healthy dose of self-doubt, honestly. Just like not enough that you talk yourself out of writing what you want or submitting to places or
Right.
exploring your authorial voice, but definitely enough to like recognize that everyone's work needs work and there's always room for growth. But it's
Yeah.
interesting, yeah, because like I think about like envy, and I've experienced it a few times with a few different writers, and it's like envy can be a good indication of what you actually value and what your goals are.
Yeah.
Something you can just kind of experience and let go and take away that wisdom from it instead of like letting it fester inside of you and become resentment and discouragement. It's just like, all right, this is something that I want for myself. So trying to keep that in mind and just like having some openness to failure, you
Yeah.
know?
I mean, one of the big things I learned about failure, I forget where I read this, but like the most successful people have actually failed the most times. And like
Hmm.
that's how it works. So, like, if you actually, some of the most successful people in the world, I mean, often, unless they're like from money and then their dad gives them a company,
Right.
like it's just that they failed a lot and then like they tried more and then failed more and eventually got there.
Hmm. And I think in everything too, there's an ebb and flow, and it's just like you have to kind of roll with the punches. Sometimes you're just in a funk and like people aren't resonating with your work, and if you've done your best with it, then you can just kind of put it aside and work on something else or take a break. Like it doesn't, you can have some amount of faith that it'll work out, I think, and just keep trying.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll say this like, one of the hardest things for me to deal with was my very, very first novel, which I trunked and I just really don't ever want to release it.
Hmm.
But and that took me 2 years, like
Hmm.
60,000 words, 2 years, first novel. Sent it out for beta reads, and people fucking hated it.
Right.
Like they were like, "This is bad. This is disgusting," and I don't mean like in that I'm a persecuted artist. I mean like they were legit. Like this isn't good. Don't release this.
Like you, sir, are a monster.
Yeah, no, I mean it was some of that because it was sort of a splatterpunk like serial killer book,
Right.
but primarily it was just like, yeah, this isn't a good novel,
Right.
and that was super hard to because you finish your first one, you're just like,
Mhm.
fuck yeah, I did it, man. I want people to be like, you are a genius, like, my
Right.
God, sir.
Yeah.
Because you hear about those people that they write their quote first novel. By the way, I don't think it's ever their first novel, but
Right.
their first novel and it just does really well and you're like, why couldn't I be like that? Why did I have to be crapping it up?
Hmm.
um but you learn to deal with like just like wide scale failure. It sounds really harsh when I say it like that, but like there's no other way to phrase it when you spend 2 years on a novel and not only do you decide to never put it out, but like the few people you show it to are like, this is bad.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty brutal. And I think all the time about, I don't know if someone said this or I just kind of like gleaned it from something someone was saying, but like it really is just about endurance more than anything. Just like,
Yeah, it's a marathon, it's not a
yeah.
race.
Yeah. And I mean, people insist that they're not competitive, and I appreciate that spirit, and I think that's a good ethos to work under. But
I don't think it's true, though.
the way that it's structured makes it untrue, right? And it's just like, even if you don't put your stuff up for an award, maybe it'll get put up for an award or it'll get rejected in favor of someone else's. And maybe there's interpersonal politics with that, or there's, like any number of reasons things happen. And it sounds cheesy, but like everyone's journey is their own. So some people, yeah, they might knock it out of the park on the first try. Other people's might have to grow into it more. There's no one way to do it.
I mean, personally, I think of people like Stephen Graham Jones, for instance. Like, he's doing really well now, and like he's been writing since the 90s, I think.
Yeah.
So it's easy to be like, that guy's doing really well. But if you don't do the, like, same with Vandermeer. I think he was writing in the 90s too.
Mm-hmm.
And he only really like blew up in like 2010-ish?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's like, I also just have this thing where you realize at some point, like, even the stuff that you write that you never use, like, it all goes in your head. You learn something from all of it. Like, even my first novel, like, yeah, I'm not letting anyone see that, but I'm taking that character and putting it in book 2 of my series, and then came up with sort of a mirror universe kind of crime procedural with basically that character type, like that sort of killer. Because I really, like, no matter what, I like figured out the voice.
Right.
And that was sort of, I guess, what the biggest shame was like, this book isn't good, but like, I know that I like have the voice and I have the character.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like your skill level hasn't matched like your imagination and your world building yet.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And it's also like, you don't know what has been influencing you in a bad way either, right? Like, my first poetry collection was not genre and it didn't get accepted anywhere, and I'm really glad it didn't, but it was kind of really influenced by this creative writing workshop I'd been part of in university. And the dynamic in that classroom was not great, and they had all taken the same intro course together, and I'd taken a different one years ago, and like they were all just like, they kind of really shaped and misshaped what I thought about the poetry writing process, and I didn't enjoy it anymore, and it wasn't true to me. And it took rediscovering that for me to be like, oh, okay, like I have to discard what I learned in that workshop, actually. Not all of it, but most of it. And, speak to what is true for me.
Yeah, I had a version of that with, I mean, we're still sort of in the Lovecraft phase, but I remember about 2013, 14, we were like in the heavy, like everything is a Lovecraft book. And so I just wanted to get stories published. So I was trying to operate in that mode. And like, I literally never had any success with it. Like, save maybe like 1 or 2, like, I'm friends with people, so I get into this. Or it was like, for free for a contributor's copy. And it was like really harsh because like I felt like I don't want to be doing this, but this seems like the only markets that are out right now. And I'm sort of glad we turned a corner on that, because it wasn't until I was finally like, dude, not only do I not like writing in this style, but I'm not good at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I finally was like, fuck it, I'm going to write what I like to write. And I seem to have I started having a little bit more success by just going, fuck it, like I'll write what I like to write. And it actually worked out, which was nice.
Yeah.
But then you can get into how I also self-published, and, that's it's a whole side thing, because some people say that's career suicide.
Right. I don't know. That's assuming that the whole industry is staying the same. And I don't think it is.
I mean, yeah, like in the 90s probably would have been career suicide, even in 2005 maybe.
Yeah.
Although we were already getting to like sort of, but now I just feel like my whole thing from jump was I'm very pro self-publishing, because to someone that would say that's career suicide, I'd have to say, you have to have a career to kill it.
Right.
Like, if you have nothing, that's not career suicide, that's just nothing. And I know people that just spend many years not getting anything published because they're trying to wait for that person to give them the cosign, when I can just be like, hey, I like these 5 stories, put it out. People responded well, even though the formatting sort of bunk. It's the first book I ever did. So I've learned since, don't just take the Word document and trust that Amazon will format it correctly.
Oh no, what happened?
I mean, it was, I don't know, like the actual print thing was fine. I mean, that was just little stuff like, the headers were too short kind of a thing.
Okay.
Like that's just you learn as you go. But then I did the auto format for the ebook, and it was like just fucking, because I finally opened it up and it was all over the place. Like the chapter headings were like half a page down or on the other page, and it was just like really like it looked weird. So I finally had to like ask my friend John, like, can you please help me actually format this?
Right.
But you learn like, okay, you have to actually either pay somebody or learn how to format yourself, and you can't just upload a Word document.
No, I could. Oh, that made me feel tense just hearing it. It's like, oh no, it sounds stressful.
But like even that, where like I look back at the actual physical, and I'm like, oh, it's a little cringe. But like people bought it, people read it, people liked it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think some of it too is just like submitting to the mortifying ordeal of being known, right? Like, it's the same thing with not rereading my work. I just have to trust that an editor liked it enough to publish it and they made any changes they wanted to make, and otherwise it was good enough. I've encountered this with my thesis too, because it's like my advisor was like, don't take another semester after this with it. It's ready to be done. You could technically work on it for the rest of your life. At some point, it just has to be done. So, that's part of that endurance piece too, is knowing when
to stop.
Yeah, and like when to ask for help, right? Instead of just being like, yeah, this will sort it out. It's like, maybe I need to talk to someone. Maybe I need to get my friend to format it. Maybe I need to pay someone for this, like, that's fine.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's true. I don't know. I know it's not for everybody, but I do like, obviously, one would hope. I do like the process of putting out other people's work and putting out my own work. I don't want to go on too much of a tirade, but what ends up happening is you see all these people and you hear their opinions and you just assume, well, they're smarter than me. That's why they're running a press. That's why they're an editor, because they're smarter than me. And then you start getting things published and you start working with various editors and you're like, yeah, they're smart. I don't know if they're smarter than me though. And you start going through and you're like, yeah, they do decent books, but like, I feel like maybe I could do something at least almost as good as that. And over the years, at least with some people, for myself, it was like, finally got to the point where I was like, all right, so I've put out 2 of my own books. I know artists, I know costs, I know what you have to do. I know the marketing to an extent. I mean, I don't think anyone in small press really knows the marketing.
Right.
Because usually it's just money. And, I had like at least a good, let's say 3 to 4 years where it was like, I really want to do NICTITATING, but I just don't feel like I'm smart enough or good enough.
Right.
And I just kept putting it off. And it wasn't until I tried shopping Screaming Creatures. This is probably like the thing I shopped the most. And it was like 2 years. And I think it wasn't even that many. Like compared to most people, it was really not that many. It was maybe 10 to 13. Turn it down. But I was finally like, so I know this is good. And so I don't know why this isn't selling. So I was finally like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to put it out myself because like I've had these things, I've had stories in like Fastarian. I've had them in like some Muzzleland Press things. Like people have responded to the stories in the actual books. So I don't know why they wouldn't respond to the full book. So I put it out and it did really well. And I was like, yeah, duh. Like I knew that.
Right. You know what you're doing. Like to some extent, the rest of it's details, right? Like I think you need to have a vision. You need to have like curatorial sensibility and an eye for details within the manuscripts. And, you got yourself a stew going. You got a press. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit though, like if a lot of it is just people won't publish my stuff. Like if somebody tomorrow was like I'm going to publish this and this and that, like I wouldn't be putting it out myself. I'd let someone else do it. But it's also sort of like, well, I can put it out myself. It seems to do all right when I put it out myself. Why wouldn't I just do that?
Yeah. In my case, the only reason I didn't really want to put out a collection of my own by myself is just that, like, promoting it, even just having one other person, dedicated to promoting it makes a difference, I think, and having another editorial eye on it is really helpful. And just like, lots of people are lovely and will beta read and give input that way. But I think if someone is acting as editors and they have a very specific kind of vision and interest in making it a certain way, and it's helpful to get that assistance from them.
It is. Admittedly, I'm sort of a shithead that just goes, fuck it, I trust myself, and I edit my own stuff, which
Yeah.
is very terrifying. Because like the novel I'm putting out next year, like that's all me. I'm not hiring an editor.
Mm-hmm.
Like I am the editor. So editing yourself is like, yeah, I'll try to get beta readers, obviously, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There's sort of that leap of faith thing. And admittedly, I feel like it's just because I have to. Like if other people were putting me out, like I don't think I'd put as many of my books out. I don't want to sound like people won't put me out. I'm also just at the point now in my career where I'm like, I'm just going to do my own stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a good idea. I don't know. I mean, if you get stuff put out by other people, are you going to keep the press going?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not. I like to say, like obviously the press is to have like a venue for myself, to have like a platform.
Mm-hmm.
But like the reason I am doing it as a press instead of just McMahon-Beast Books is I want to put out other people's books.
Right.
Like if I was just doing myself, like yeah, just like whatever jokey name.
Mm-hmm.
But I do want to learn. I mean, I am learning how to be an editor. I did Jonathan Rabb's. Oh God, I always forget the name of it too, and it's on my shelf. Crypt of Blood, I think that's what it is.
Nice.
It's like a novelette. That was like the first. Well, not big because it was probably only like 20,000 words, but yeah, it's one of my first bigger editorial projects. And then I work with Maxwell, and I'm working with Paula Ashe right now, and like it's been nice to like learn like like I'm not a total fucking idiot. Like I can actually sort of do this.
Yeah.
Granted, I still get confused on commas, so that on that end, yes, I can be sort of a fucking idiot. But that's another thing you learn. Nobody knows how commas work. You ask 10 people, they all have different answers.
That's part of the fun of poetry too, is like, because that's when punctuation matters a lot, right? I mean, you can have a comma splice in a piece of fiction and it'll stand out a little bit, but it won't change the meaning necessarily, But if you do in a poem, it's a much shorter space, so it's just like shit, So you can really labor over the use of punctuation in a poem, or at least I have spent like an hour being like.
I will say I feel mortified because like I definitely for years was using commas wrong and in stuff I've published.
Right.
And I have to just be like, oh, it's like Corbin McCarthy, whatever. I just make my own rules.
Yeah, there you go.
Instead of like I was just actively fucking up and never really learned.
If you don't know, it's experimental, that's all. It was experimental and it was deliberate.
Yeah, no, it's true.
You could just go with that. I mean,
yeah.
I will say I have written experimental stuff, so that's not to say that I wasn't deliberate. I'm not just bullshitting with my experimental stuff. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, I like experimental. You wouldn't think I was really into experimental stuff, but I really am. It's just I usually have this veneer of realism around it, so maybe people don't always at first realize that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm currently rewriting my own novella, so like that's one of the more experimental things I've heard of.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not quite into the like take magazine clippings and throw them in a trash bin and roll it down a hill and then whatever the order is, that's the poem.
Right. That's cool though. I mean, that's like old school, and it seems really contemporary, but like, poets were doing that in the early 20th century. Different Dadaist artists and poets were doing that.
Yeah.
Just fun. I don't know. Something a century old manages to feel still very contemporary.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, I don't know. I always have to have that one little. I've tried to do just like straight realist stuff, and I always have to have that one little thing that like skews left a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I think it's just more fun that way, right? And like, it gives you something to measure the realism against.
Yeah, I mean, my whole thing, like the first novel people know me from is Demon, and my whole thing with that was I watched a lot of possession stuff and demon stuff,
Mhm.
and almost none of it dealt with what it was like to be possessed.
Mhm.
Because it was always the other, like Exorcist, it's like the other,
Right.
Damien, the other. No one ever made it the inner. Like, no one ever was like, this is like, this would be what it would be like.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I just thought, like, that, I don't know, I'd like to try that. So that's what I did, man. Like, I write as somebody who's possessed for like a good chunk of that book.
Nice. Yeah, I always thought possession was like really rich ground for exploring what it's like to have mental illness, right? Because it's just like
Well, yeah,
I don't
also you
have a
get into,
choice about these episodes. Like this takes over my brain and how I operate in the world. This fucking sucks, and I would imagine that possession is like that.
yeah, I mean, I'm a former addict too. So that was like
Mm.
fairly easy to write because it's just
Yeah,
like, oh, you mean a force that like wills you that you almost can't control? Yeah, I have no idea what that's like.
yeah. I went with my friend to a support group once, and she had to do it for a school project or something. I was like, sure, this feels very Fight Club. That'll be fun. And
Right?
and what they said in it, they were like, anything you can't say no to is your God. And I was like, shit, I can't believe I got that from this group. Like, I'm gonna carry this with me for the rest of my life. Well, now I'm just like interrogating different things in my life and for my characters too. And in my poetry, it's like, what can't we say no to?
Yeah, no, it's true.
And in some cases, that's like obligatory. Like in like capitalism again, right? Like we don't have much of a choice unless we go completely off grid. And like you still need to some extent to be able to afford to do that. You have to have tools and available land and all that stuff. So these
Yeah.
inescapable forces in your
No,
life
I
have
have
to
this thing that's pretty cheap. I find myself doing over and over, but I'll take a character and establish that they have a job, a relationship, and just take it away, and then like that's the character in the book
hmm
because they're like stripped of like financial access and uh social, I don't know, support.
hmm
It's sort of cheap when you do it every time, but it's less cheap than the A24 thing of just being like, we're going to start and the mom will be dead.
right.
Because that's like literally every A24 now. It's just like, the dad died. And you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
But when it's every single one, you're like, okay. It's
Right.
turning into like Disney villain territory type stuff.
Oh man, I love the old Are You Afraid of the Dark series. Have you ever watched it?
Yes,
From the
it's
night.
like one of my favorite things. I
Yes, me
was
too.
so into it that in college, about 2003 or 4, I got a bootlegged version off of eBay that came in a purple jean CD holder.
What? Oh my God,
And
that's
it was
incredible.
like they obviously burned them themselves, but like, I don't know what they used on the top, but it came off in the DVD player
What?
and like ruined one of my DVD players. But I managed to watch all of them first, at least.
Yeah. Wow, early 2000s problems. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, but that's how I was like willing to destroy a piece of equipment into Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yeah. Well, like those episodes were often just like, oh, like I rewatch them fairly often just because they're fun, especially this time of year. And
Yeah,
it's like, it's always like, oh, I'm the mom and I'm too busy and it's just me. Go have
yeah,
spooky adventures, children. It's just like, yeah,
yeah. They almost never have. I mean, if they do have two parents, they always are like just not around.
yeah, very absent parents. And it's funny too, because like this is totally tangential, but whatever.
That's fine.
Sardo, the magic shop owner. So like I didn't realize this until like a couple years ago, but their dad, Gary's dad, and the other kid, his brother, their dad is a magic shop owner. So he's like the stand-in for their dad.
Oh, oh wow. They
Like,
made their dad real goofy, huh?
yeah, just like the super shady occult objects dealer that is just like,
It's like a total con man that has no idea what he's doing.
yeah, just like getting
Dude,
all
I
these,
love that. I love that show so much. One of my big aha moments too was as a kid I didn't realize they were all Canadian.
right.
And I was just like, oh, okay. And then I said I got older. I'm like, wait, every kid's playing hockey.
Right.
And they're saying Suri. I'm like, that's not, wait a minute.
Yeah.
It's almost like Canadian propaganda. They just snuck it in.
Not as bad as Degrassi, but yeah, pretty close.
I don't know. Maybe that was when I learned I actually like Canadians because I was like, I really like this show. Does that mean by default I like Canadians?
Yeah, Canadians are pretty cool.
Because that whole thing was Canadian, right? Like the whole, I mean, like the directors, writers,
Oh yeah.
staff.
Yeah, absolutely. Ryan Gosling was on a couple episodes.
I remember. Oh, he is Canadian, isn't
Yeah, he was on
he?
Breaker
Yeah.
High too, along with one of the guys
Yeah,
from
like
Tucker and Dale.
Jewel Sadie from Firefly was on there at one
Yeah,
point.
I think it's
They had
just
a
like
lot of people.
everybody was on there at some point, all the young people who were acting in Canada at the
Well,
time.
it's like I mean, the older version would be Tales from the Crypt, where it's
Hmm.
like you go back and watch those, and it's like so many actors. Like Benicio del Toro was on Tales from the Crypt, Brad Pitt, Demi Moore. Like if you actually go through the list, it's staggering,
I have a
and
hard
they're
time.
all like with a, doing like these shitty little 20-minute morality plays of like his dick rotted off because he wasn't clean, like,
Yep,
and then it's a puppet going like. He liked loot. I don't know. I don't want to do the Crypt Keeper.
that was a great Crypt Keeper.
Just real quick. Yeah, no. So totally, this is what people tuned in for.
Hey man, we could
My
start a
sort of
whole.
half-assed Tales from the Crypt Keeper.
Anyone wants to start Are You Afraid of the Dark podcast? I am in.
I think people have already.
I'm sure they have. There's
I
a
think like
podcast.
hundreds of people have.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably couponing podcasts at this point, right? Like, I don't, whatever. I listen to
Yeah, I mean,
some
it's
podcasts.
funny too because people will, when I tell them I've done podcasts and currently do a podcast, I'm like, wow, that's so exciting. And I'm like, no, it's like literally everyone has one.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised I haven't actually gotten one going yet. My friend was thinking about it, and he used to work in radio, and it's like, that could be fun as long as you take over all the technical aspects. I'll just show up and
Right,
talk
yeah.
about books. No problem.
I've had a few. I don't count, by the way, I don't count this as a podcast. I count this as an interview series.
Woohoo.
I
I
know
don't
it's
know the
a
difference.
weird distinction, but it's only on YouTube
Ah,
um, by choice because I don't want to, I don't know, I don't view it as a podcast. I view it as an interview series,
mm-hmm. That's cool.
which is a little different, I guess.
Yeah, different.
Although you could get into the semantics of like, well, maybe it's exactly the same.
I mean,
Um,
yeah, it's audio
but
to listen to. I don't know.
yeah, I did one. First one I did, yeah, because this is what people give a shit about. The first one I did was called, oh my god, so cringe. Spooky Sean's Sinful Bloggery ... from the Nether Regions. Because I called the basement my Nether Regions. And then eventually I shortened it to Spooky Sean's Podcastery. That was it. And that lasted for maybe 4 months.
Okay.
But, I like learned how to interviewing people and like how to do it through Skype and all that. And then I did Miskatonic Musings for, oh geez, that was almost 5 years. And for the first 2 years, it was once a week.
Damn.
So like taught me a lot about just like keeping to a schedule and like having a large workload for no money.
Mm-hmm. Just
I
like
mean,
writing.
people still, yeah, like be like, yeah, I really love that show. And I'm like, yeah, I haven't done it in 2 years. And now I do Celluloid Citizens, which is a film podcast because I like the idea of just doing like an all-purpose film because again, as much as I love horror and consider myself a horror person, like that's not all of who I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's better not to let it be, right? Because I was thinking before we started this, I was like, okay, if he asks me about writers, I'm gonna underscore the fact that I don't only read horror, and I don't know if that's like trite or not, but it's just like,
I mean, personally, I think it's like good because I think
yeah,
if you're too, as much as I mostly read horror, if that's all you read, I think you start to like inadvertently sound like everyone you're reading.
Yeah, I mean,
Whereas if you're reading like a wide, sci-fi, fantasy, whatever, it'll be, I just think it helps your voice.
yeah, and I'm really scared of just like absorbing someone's idea and not realizing I've done it and then doing something with it, and I would not want to do that, right? So it's good to read widely enough to confuse myself about where my ideas are coming from.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is a common thing, but like, I read some lit fiction, and sometimes I get the sense from reviewers. Like, I had one guy who read Too Late who was like, I didn't give a crap about any of the characters and nothing happened. And I'm like, so you're talking about literary fiction?
Yeah. Did it have a lot
um,
of bourgeois ennui? Because then you're just nailing it.
no, it wasn't that bad, but it would just be like, like instead of just a monster comes, it would be like, we're talking as people and this is the world. And then a monster comes.
Right.
And some people cannot handle that.
They want monsters only?
I guess, yeah.
Ah.
I mean, I think they're dumb people, but
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I want the monster to show the monstrosity of humanity, I guess. I mean, that's what I love about Frankenstein, right? It's just like it's about the fact that existence is terrible and shouldn't be foisted on anyone.
well, it's also about like how men think they can control nature
Yeah.
and that they're allowed to. And
Hmm.
then men realizing like, oh shit, no, I did it bad.
Yeah. What have I done?
But yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. Like, even this one, Stranded in the Storm, which is one of my first stories I got published for a contributor copy. Like, it's about a werewolf, but like, it's actually about like, what's the term? Survivor's guilt.
Nice.
So it's basically I mean, it's in the moment, but it gets into how this woman is like off in the trees because she had to use the bathroom or something, and like watches her boyfriend get like mauled by a werewolf, and she can't do anything. And then the rest of the story is her like just like really scared, but also like feeling really guilty that she couldn't do a single thing.
Yeah.
Kitty, come on. You're the worst.
I had to cover Rougarou in my thesis. I have a chapter on monsters in the
Nope.
Indigenous narrative.
Kitty.
And when my advisor recommended it, I was just like, man, that sucks. I don't care about werewolves.
Aw.
I know, but in researching it and thinking about it more, I was just like, you know what? Okay, I'm down with this monster because they really highlight how much humans suppress their animal nature, and they really represent that division that people create between nature and man and that idea of self-control. So it's like, okay, yeah, like the idea of being controlled by the moon and transforming that way is pretty horrifying to people.
No, I mean, I don't know. I've thought about like, and it would be a continuation of that story because I did establish that the werewolf is actually a woman who's a lawyer around the New England area, which I then, subsequently realized, oh, that's just that Jack Nicholson movie, but I gender swapped it. But whatever, no one likes that movie, so it doesn't matter.
I don't even know what movie it is. What movie is that?
I think it was just called Wolf.
Oh, was that
And
early
he's like a
90s?
lawyer, but then he's a werewolf. And I think Michelle Pfeiffer was in it too.
Weird career choices for both of them.
It is, but I think I do have a novel in mind, and the idea would basically be like you treat it like kitty fucking stop. You basically just treat it as like a serial killer thing, and you get into like, I don't know, somebody that can't control their urges, and then you introduce a detective character, and there's a lesbian love story, but then it's like she starts to slowly piece together like, like there would be a murder basement, for instance, like with like, harnesses and shit.
Mm-hmm.
So you do it in that way instead of like, so you sort of have it animalistic, but in like a practical sort of like human way.
Right. Damn, James Spader and David Hyde Pierce are in that. And David Schwimmer, he plays a cop.
What, Wolf?
Yeah, I had to look it up.
I haven't seen that shit in forever. So it really was like when I finished writing the story and then I was like, oh, that was a movie. Like I had completely, it was somewhere in my brain, but I had completely forgotten.
Right. Yeah. 94. Like, when did she do Dangerous Minds? I need to get off this. I'm sorry. This is
I don't remember.
just like, yeah, I'm in
96?
and also Dangerous Minds.
96 or 97? Maybe it was earlier.
Interesting.
I don't know. Well, I'm getting into the point where I'm talking about possible novels and then old movies no one remembers. So we're probably hitting the end of the logical period of interview.
Okay.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. We'll probably do another one of these closer to your release date.
Cool.
But I guess let's get the plugs out of the way. So is there anything you want to plug right now?
I'm going to be in the November issue of Nightmare. We mentioned that at the top of the podcast. Right now I have an Indigenous futurist story out with Apex Magazine, one of their special issues, and also a poem out in this month's issue of Mermaids Monthly. So you can find those at all of their respective websites. And you can follow me on Twitter at Tiff Morris.
Nice. All right. So my end, we just released Maxwell Bauman's wonderful haunted house novella, House of Blood and Teeth. So that is currently available in ebook and physical formats off of Amazon. And if you like it, please rate and review, which is the same, of course, and tell your friends as well. And also we have two of my books, Astrum, ebook only, 99 cents, and Screaming Creatures, my first full-length collection, both available from NICTITATING Books. And obviously we got a lot of stuff in the future. Currently, let's say like halfway done working on Paula Ash's collection in terms of compiling and editing. And then for 2022, obviously Tiffany's going to have a poetry book. Haven't really come up with a title yet. There's a working one. And there's some other people I've talked to, and I'm probably going to put out a 90s slasher novel that I wrote. So yeah, all good things. And we are on Twitter now as well. I believe it's at NICTITATINGB. So yeah, again, Tiffany, thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Will Allen.
Indeed. I don't know what that means, but I'll assume it's... Ah, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. And stay tuned, guys. We're going to have a lot more interviews coming your way.